When I was a junior medical student, we were considered by everybody, including the patients, to be pretty useless and stupid. And a large part of that was true because we were obviously very inexperienced. But you have to cut your teeth somewhere. And once we were allowed, um, our main duties would be to draw the blood, to do the bloods, to send off to the laboratory. And so we'd have to be there about 7 o'clock in the morning. And it could easily take you 2 hours to do all the bloods for the particular ward you were on. And we didn't particularly like doing it, but we kind of missed the point, really, as one of the bosses told me. I mean, we got pretty good at taking blood under any conditions, which is an absolutely keynote skill that any doctor requires, especially one who works in emergency situations. And also, as the boss said, he said, well, you know, you can learn a lot about patients by just talking to them. And he was right, of course. But there, you live and learn. And the reason why I was thinking about this was because about 3 weeks ago, I chose to have a blood test, and nothing unusual about that. But perhaps the thing that struck me about how fast science has moved, biotechnology has moved, they required 1 drop of blood. So I had one of these little lancets that you prick your thumb with, and 1 drop of blood, and there you are. And they can do, well, in that particular case, they did 200 tests on that 1 drop of blood. And I'm sure with the technology, they could have done lots more if I'd been prepared to pay for them. So I think that's a great advance in medicine. And when I used to direct hospitals, I was always interested in what went on in the labs, because we have to trust the results, because they're so crucial to the diagnosis and therapy and everything else. And we were just starting to move in then to automated machines, where we could do malaria tests, for example, on a single drop of blood. And things like that made it much easier working with kids, because previously we were having to put in needles and draw a lot. So there are some very many good things about modern medicine. But more pertinent to our discussion today and some of the topics that we discuss is, actually, I got more than 1 drop of blood, because it carried on making drops for a couple of minutes or so, and trying to put the labels on this thing that I was trying to fill up with one hand was quite difficult. And so the obvious thing was that I had a sterile towel, and I had a Band-Aid plaster ready, and I just dried the finger and I put the Band-Aid on, and sure enough, the blood stopped. But of course, I didn't need the Band-Aid. The Band-Aid just made things more convenient, because if I'd been a little more patient, in another couple of minutes at the most, the finger would have stopped bleeding, because that's one of the miracles of nature, the self-healing, the self-repairing aspects of it. Sounds pretty simple, a little pinprick being sealed off by a little cobweb-like fibrin network, but there are hundreds of biological chemicals and processes that go into that, apart from the stimulation of all of the white blood cells and the immune response. So a simple operation like taking a drop of blood gives you food for thought. And the food for thought that it particularly gave me was, you've heard before in previous shows, my views about all of the different therapies and healing modalities and techniques that are available to us. And in conventional medicine, obviously, but also in alternative medicine or complementary medicine, as they sometimes refer to it. And that's the field that I'm in now. I wouldn't say that I've turned my back on conventional medicine. I just find that the kind of work that we do, we get to the root causes. We're not treating the symptoms, we're treating what's underneath, or at least we're trying to. And so what all of these techniques have is almost all of them are effective in the right hands. Almost all of them are safe treatments, and almost all of them, well, as I said, effective and produce results. Not for everybody, but there are very few things in modern medicine that can treat everybody anyway. And that's where the faith, the trust that we have in our own inner resources comes into it. The trust that we can leave our little poorly thumb and it will heal itself on its own without us having to think about it and without us having to even know the complexity of the operations that are running. And so it is with the mind and the rest of the body. Most of the very best stuff that happens to us is in our unconscious mind, in our autonomic nervous system, in these pre-programmed, evolved networks and resources that we have. And as Greg pointed out, unfortunately, it's the ego where we live, and the ego gets in the way of this kind of stuff. The ego certainly gets in the way of trusting stuff that we don't understand, because that's the way we've all been brought up, and ego likes to remind us of that. If you can't prove it, it doesn't exist. Well, I don't really want to get into a sort of an argument with anybody about that, a pedantic argument about that. But the truth is that the more that I read about science and the scientists and the people who win Nobel Prizes, they're the very first people to say there are so many things that we don't understand. But that doesn't mean to say they don't exist. It's just that we haven't found the right words or the right medium to be able to explain some of these things. But it's really, really important. The reason why I've gone on a bit of length about this is that it's really, really important to the work that I do and to the work that I do with my coaches. And the tough thing about this is that it's very, very difficult to put into words what I'm trying to put into words now, that you just have to let go of stuff. You just don't worry about stuff and let the good things happen, whatever good might be. And also it means to let the bad things happen as well, because we don't always know what bad is. It might feel bad at the time, but so often bad can turn into good. And the only way that I've found that anybody has been able to get across these messages, it's been through metaphor. There aren't the words to describe it. And it's like a universal knowledge that is soaked up by osmosis. And that's one of the reasons why I have these calls, because if I was only seeing a client for one or two occasions, I wouldn't even go anywhere near this subject. The person wouldn't be ready and I wouldn't have the words. But by being exposed and hearing these things time and time again, ego might be saying, well, we've heard Steve say this again, and now he's saying it again. What, hasn't he got anything else to talk about? Well, trust me, I've got a lot of things to talk about, but I know from my own journey and the kind of people that I've studied and worked with, that this is the only way to go deep into the subject that we're studying, which is, I guess, finding the Zen mind state, finding the zone that we've talked about, finding peak performance, finding the best person that we could be before ego started taking charge. And of course, ego had plenty of support from loads of other people around to convince you that you had to listen to this person, even if you didn't want to do what he or she was telling you to do all the time. So that's my sort of introductory preamble. I hope it's made you think about a few things. I hope it's made you think that, attending these webinars and listening and talking about these kind of things has some importance to our lives and what we can expect to get from them. And certainly how we can expect to have a lot less stress than many of us are having at the moment. So this is the time when I'll ask you to let Greg know if you've got a question or to wave your hand and talk to me about anything. It's something you might have heard today or for last week that you're still thinking about, or something that's just occurred to you in the moment, because sometimes the best things, if not always, are in the moment.
Okay, so has anybody any questions? We usually start slowly in the show. I always have some backup question or a story So let me tell that, and actually, it just popped in my mind when Steve was talking about healing and alternative medicine. And so my story with that was a couple of years ago, um, 6, 7 years ago, I've been diagnosed with hypothyroidism. I had no energy. I wanted to sleep all the time. My brain was keep telling me go to sleep, and I wanted to fix that. And I found this meditation workshop, a 3-day meditation workshop. And I went there with the intention to learn how to meditate finally, because I tried many times on my own at home and I couldn't do it. And I went to this workshop, and on the day 2, the guy was explaining each meditation. Over the 3 days, we've done maybe 5 meditations. So each was properly explained by the guy who ran the show. And after like 2 or 3 hours description of the meditation that we were just about to do, he asked us to do an intention, what we want to achieve with that meditation, with that particular one that we were just about to do. So I said to myself, I want to heal my thyroid. This is the best way to confirm if it's working or not. And I've done this meditation for the first time in my life, properly meditated for 45 minutes, got really emotional in the process. Meditation was done, we hugged the people around us. I went back home after the 3 days. And the Monday morning I woke up and I had plenty of energy, whole day full of energy. Then the next day, same thing. The third day I started to think, oh my God, something is happening not right, even though I was feeling great and full of energy. And I went to check my blood. So actually that thing reminded me when you were about blood tests. I went to my GP to test my blood, and cut the long story short, they phoned me. I called them actually because they didn't call me back, which meant my results were right. And I asked the doctor to walk me through one by one, and she said basically, Greg, you've got no symptoms of hypothyroidism, and in fact, you've got the best results since we've started testing you. So that's my story with that, and my question would be, what does Zen say about that? What Zen teachings would say about how I've done it, what happened actually within me in that short period of time that I was just fixed. It seemed like I was fixed. And just one more note, when going to the meditation workshop, I had no energy. I was constantly thinking how I'm gonna survive sitting in a chair for 6 hours a day without falling asleep. Thank you.
Well, thank you for sharing the story. I think we all love to hear stories like this because it gives encouragement to all of us. Because from the conventional medical viewpoint, I can't give you an explanation for that. We would call that in medicine, we'd call that a spontaneous remission. Now, I've been on conferences and things, and I've heard keynote speakers say, there's always in the basement of a hospital a locked filing area, and on the door will be spontaneous remission case notes. Well, I can assure you, I've explored every inch of every hospital I've ever worked in, and I've never found those rooms, although it's a curious story, an appealing story, if it were true, if it is true. But what I certainly do know is that there are some patients who definitely overcome the odds. They defy the dire predictions their doctors have given them. Like, I'm sorry, there is no treatment for this condition. There is no cure. There are no pills. There are no operations. And some people do come through the other side. How? Why? I don't know that, but there have been studies, and as in one of my books, I mention a lady doctor from Canada, I think, who has worked with HIV patients, and that was in the early days of HIV when it was a much more serious, quickly fatal illness than fortunately it is now. And she identified characteristics. So I think the book was something called The C Patient. And because she worked with some cancer patients as well, and she tried to identify the key characteristics of the survivors. And again, it's a little bit counterintuitive. You would expect the good, deserving, kind people to be the survivors, but unfortunately, well, no, it was the other way around. Counterintuitively, it was the other way around. The people who survived were ones who would be labeled difficult patients, or as I was labeled when I refused to take the statins, a non-compliant patient. And I didn't like that phrase, and so I actually had a discussion with the doctor about it, and I think he removed it from the records, but wasted a few minutes of my time. And I guess I was a spontaneous remission as well, because all the various risk factors that I was supposed to have to need statins in the first place, disappeared. Different diet, bit more exercise, bit more meditation, and I'm a spontaneous remission, but nothing as dramatic as you, Greg. So the ones that this lady, I'm sure it was Linda something or other, the survivors were the ones who took charge. Well, they didn't take charge, but they took ownership of their problem, and they didn't necessarily accept everything that they were told. And they certainly didn't accept the self-hypnotic inductions that all doctors are good at. I'm afraid you're going to have to understand that there is no cure, because doctors are good hypnotists. I've done it myself, and they will believe it. And I've had to say those words myself as well, so I'm not blaming anybody here. That's just the way it is. So sometimes, taking charge is a good thing. And but anyway, don't believe me. Just find the book and read it. This lady explains it a lot better. So there are spontaneous remissions, Greg. I would go back. What does Zen have to say about that? I think Zen probably doesn't have anything to say about that. They wouldn't even say good, because if you do that, what's good, what's bad? It feels good. It definitely feels good for you. Nobody's going to argue about that. But if Zen were to say anything, they would say, well, that's why we meditate every day when we follow Zen. That's what we get from it. We believe that heart, body, and the mind, body, and soul are indivisible. They might say that. We could go back even further about Hippocrates, and we've mentioned him before, the father of modern medicine, 2,000 years BC, which is 4,000 years ago. And I think he said everybody has their own doctor inside them. So, we are designed to self-heal, just like the finger prick. It was, it would have got better without the Band-Aid. Maybe if I'd meditated a bit more that morning, it might have stopped bleeding in less than the 2 minutes that I gave it, impatiently. So, yeah. Good story, Greg. Thanks for sharing it.
Thank you.
Most of us on the...
Yeah, sorry. So just a follow-up question. So what do you think, how important is the intention in all that process? Is the intention to bridge between the infinite intelligence which is around us? We need to make that intention to connect with the intelligence, so intelligence suddenly knows where to go, how to heal us, or does the super intelligence just know and it would heal us without the intention?
Well, that's also another good question. I think I've used the word concession at least once before on a show. And when we have a pure thought or a pure philosophy, and that might be that we can trust in infinite intelligence or God, to do whatever is the right thing for us, the best thing, whatever that might be, then you could argue that no intention is necessary. That it's almost like an insult, really, questioning the ability of this thing up here, whatever it might be, to know what's going on in your head and what you require. But I can see also how it would help. That's why I say it's a concession, because it's a very, very big leap for most people to completely let go of of what they want, of what their problem is. So one has to be a little careful about intention. First of all, because something that we want, which is our intention, might be a lot less than what the universe is ready to provide us if we'll get out of the way. And secondly, with an intention, it's sometimes careful what you wish for. Now, it's pretty clear in your case, Greg, you wanted your thyroid problem to resolve itself. And so it did. And your meditation was targeted in that direction. Good. Helped you to get there, but you'd have probably got there without it as well.
So it is like magic, really. I think so. If intention, in my view, intention, is that direction for the energy. Because if Hippocrates said that we are the healers, but the doctor is within, then the doctor needs to know what to fix, I suppose. It's a rhetorical question, really.
Yeah, well, I think that might be a problem, actually, because the doctor thinks that he or she knows what they have to fix. Doctors are trained in the way that I was trained. We're brought up to take very good histories of our patient and get to amass a lot of what's going in their body, the symptoms, and then we examine them, and those are called the signs. And we put all that together, what we find, and we come up with a differential diagnosis. So I guess it's like a pre-artificial intelligence algorithm. That's the way we were trained. And we would come up with a list of about 5 things that could be troubling the patient, ranked in order, and we'd try and find out which it was, exclude some, see what's left. But it's a bit like a sticking plaster. What's underneath it? Why has this person got pneumonia for the 3rd time this year? You know what antibiotics to give, but why would this person get it? What's going on in their immune system? Dare I say it, what's going on in their autonomic nervous system? What's going on in their mind? What's going on in their life? These are the kind of questions that doctors aren't trained to ask, or at least they weren't in my day. I'm sure things have changed a lot since then.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions? Is it me and Steve today only? It's open dialogue.
Well, I've got a question. I've got a question up my sleeve. And
I think okay, but I think Christine is there.
Oh,
so
okay.
Let's give the voice to her.
Hello, everyone. Steve, your medical knowledge, would you saying more about the benefits of meditation from a physiology point of view, please?
Christine, I'm sorry. Could you repeat that, because I had a little bit of background noise and I didn't pick up the whole thing.
Steve, would you be kind enough to tell us a bit more about what happens when we meditate from a point of view of physiology?
I can tell you a bit. I'm not an expert in this area. It's all got to do with a lot of it has got to do with neuropharmacology, and the words in there are very long words. They're hard to pronounce and even harder to spell. But really, we have like happy chemicals, and we have chemicals that are designed to defend us. They're called the stress, fight and flight chemicals, adrenaline and cortisone and stuff like that. And when people are stressed for a long time, those are the chemicals that persist in the system at the expense of the happy stuff, and I think serotonin would come into that. And of course, the endorphins that we know a lot more about. So there is this balance in our mind, and in nature, the balance would be pretty perfect, I imagine. But in our life, in our overstimulated environment, in our life of a lot of uncertainties that we stress out that we can't control, because increasingly we've been brought up to believe that we should be able to control things. I would say that in the West, we know the rates of mental illness are just rising rapidly every single year. And yet materially, we have less to worry about than the people in the poorer nations who are really struggling to survive from one day to the next. But that doesn't stop us worrying. And meditation helps to balance these conflicting neuropharmacological reactions that are going on. And there has been research done, and we've mentioned heart math before, which is a variant of meditation. They've put together a lot of the research papers that have been done by accredited universities and researchers that from an academic background that we should be able to trust, and I'm sure we can. So they've shown that people who meditate on a regular basis, they show that their blood pressure can drop, they show that their objective stress levels drop, they can show that their rates of heart disease and even cancer drop. So there's some pretty good medical reasons why meditation is good, and I suspect that it's because it's affecting or improving the situation underneath those various conditions that improve. What do you think, Christine? I'm guessing you're a meditator.
Yes, I've been intrigued, wondering whether some of your influence has come from the Surrender Experiment by Michael Singer.
It hasn't, because I've never heard of it. So I'm sure you're going to educate all of us. The floor is yours.
It struck, I've had this on my Kindle library for a long time, and the idea, it sort of met up with the idea that you had said, probably at the start of the series, this idea of letting go and getting out of the way. And he has written an account really of how he has allowed meditation and letting what you would call infinite intelligence determine what happens to him through his career, and how things happen even when there's a crisis, or seems to be a crisis, the right person suddenly appears, which is a bit like the philosophy of when the pupil is ready, the teacher appears. And many of the things that you have mentioned seem to fit into what he has experienced. And the fact that meditation was such a large part of his life, in fact, it became such a key part of his life that his whole professional working life revolved around, he kept these sessions within his working day. They were sacrosanct. Nothing else would intrude upon that timetabling. So I was very fascinated to hear from you medical ideas about it, and the chemical balance, of course, within the body, and whether this was part of your influence about surrendering not in a passive way, but in a way to let new energies come in.
Well, meditation has definitely started me thinking about that. But I mean, I first became interested in meditation and Zen when I was 17. So that's a long time ago. And when I was at medical school, I think I'd be 22. And that's when there was a very strong meditation movement called, it'll come to me at 3 o'clock in the morning. But really, there were groups of teachers who were going, they'd learned a branch of meditation in India, and were spreading it out throughout the West. And they were visiting universities and schools and all those kind of things. And it was quite a trendy thing to do. They taught you to meditate for 20 minutes twice a day. And in Hollywood, on the answer phones, they would always say, don't call me at this time in the morning or in the afternoon, because those are my meditation slots. So, and I've stuck with it ever since. Not every day. There are times when it's not important to me, and there are times when it's been very important to me. So it's definitely underpins, I guess, many of the things that I believe in. And when you said, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear, I think that's a Buddhist quotation. So, and it's true. I mean, we learn in therapy, if somebody's not ready to make a change or to embrace some of the ideas we might want to put forward to them, then they're wasting their time and our time as well. And when I went to a Michigan business school, I was there for 2 weeks, and I looked at my notes. I'd only written 3 things down, but I guess I still remember what those 3 things are. And one of them was when a kid has a hammer, everything's a nail. So when we learn a skill, we have no shortage of potential clients in the world around us. And we think, we want to help everybody, and we think we can. And we probably could, but only if that person is ready. Because if they're not, we're wasting our time.
Please can I challenge the idea of wasting the time, because we all have to be in wherever we are to make the next step. So even though we don't appear to be making progress with somebody, whatever you've shared, the energy you've shared, is part of all our histories and can generate something out of that.
Yes, I definitely stand corrected there, Christine. You're absolutely right, because none of us can take all this stuff on board at once. And there's a Richard Bandler expression, which is his normal tautological thing. Everybody moves at a speed and rate that's appropriate for the individual. So we've all got to start somewhere, and those of us who are intuitively guided or kind of sense that there's something to this kind of stuff, we stay the course, and we start learning stuff by osmosis. When I was saying, we're wasting my time, wasting their time, I'm thinking of the person. Usually, whenever you give a talk, and if there's a fair enough number of people there. And let's talk about hypnosis, because I don't do hypnosis stage shows, but I've been trained to a high level in hypnosis, and hypnosis is now an automatic part of my life. I just don't even think about it. And that's one of the reasons. I was going to say it in my earlier preamble, but it escaped my mind. But the reason why listening to the same message over and over again is because I give that message with, shall we say, hypnotic overtones. If I said exactly the same words, but I said them in a different way, they wouldn't sort of linger so long in the unconscious. The idea is to stimulate the unconscious and let the unconscious choose, don't like this doesn't work for me, or prepared to think about that a little longer, see what sense that I can make of it. But anyway, I mean, if I do sometimes do hypnosis demonstrations to groups of people. These will be for therapeutic reasons. It's not to make people think they're rabbits and jumping up and down on the stage. But there's always going to be one person sitting on the front row. They're usually male, but not always, but usually. They usually sit like this, and they usually keep looking behind them, waving to a friend. And I know what they're thinking. They're saying, come on, this is a challenge. You hypnotize me. So I just deliberately ignore them. My eyes go nowhere near them, because I know that I could hypnotize them, but it would take so long, and I just don't have the energy or the time for that. And I don't think therapeutically it would do a great deal of good either, because this person is obviously, they're not prepared to just accept and keep an open mind. That person doesn't have an open mind. Anyway, that's a bit of a long answer, Christine, but did it get me off the hook?
No, it's all valuable. Thank you, Steve.
Okay, do we have any other questions?
No questions, no comments so far.
No? Okay, well, let me just make a few closing comments, and then we can go and get on with our Thursday evening, well, in this hemisphere, this part of the world where we are right now. One of the things that I was pondering asking you all a question, and I didn't, because we didn't have time, but something for you to think about. There we are, something to think about over the next few days. Many of us are coming out of this period of lockdown, which is what we call it in this country. I think in the States they call it something different, but we all know what lockdown is. And some of us in some countries, we haven't we're still right in the eye of the storm. But there's no doubt that this has been a once-in-a-lifetime experience for most of us. Most of us have never been confined to our own barracks for so many weeks at a time. None of us have been deprived of close contact with friends and family and all of the other stuff that we do. I say most of us because there are some of us who have done something similar through choice. We've worked in places that are very remote, where we are cut off from all, those normal things that we take for granted. But I guess they're a fraction of people. But even so, I can tell you that it doesn't make it any easier. It's just the only benefit I get is I've been there before and I know I'll come out the other side. So my question would be, how do we think we might have changed as people as a result of this experience? If at all. But I've definitely noticed some changes in myself and in the few other people that I've been able to interact with over this time. And of course, we have been able to keep up our Zoom calls with friends and all the rest of it. So once again, we haven't been totally cut off from the rest of life, but although it sometimes feels like it. So have a think about that over the next few days, and feel free to send me an email with your thoughts, because we may well talk more about it in the next show. But that's a week away. A lot can happen in a week. We might talk about something completely different. So thanks very much for coming along. It's always great to see familiar faces, and I'll be here same time next week, or certainly plan to be. I suppose Greg should say you shouldn't plan anything, Steve, just see what happens. Yeah, if I'm around and I look at the watch, it's around about this time, I'll be here. Okay, so anyway, have a great week yourselves, and spend a little time in quiet reflection. Doesn't have to be meditation, and we'll see what the unconscious mind puts on our plate tomorrow. Okay, goodbye to all of you.